This is ACOFAE. Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
This episode has spoilers surrounding Heavenbreaker. However, we do note when we start the spoiler conversation. We also have mentions of Harry Potter, Twilight, A Knight's Tale, and Pacific Rim. For full list, please see show notes.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, your weekly deep dive into the fantasy, literature, and fandoms that we love. I'm Laura Marie.
And I'm Jessica Marie.
And today we are welcoming a very special guest and our new friend, New York Times bestselling author Sara Wolf,
whose newest release, Heavenbreaker, is out May 21st, 2024. Welcome, Sara.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sara Wolf. I'm the New York Times bestselling author of the Lovely Vicious series, but I also wrote Bring Me Their Hearts, and my new book, Heavenbreaker, is coming out May 21st. It's nice to meet everyone. Hello, hello.
Thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much, truly, for taking the time. We really appreciate it. I want to jump off right away. It is no surprise. Jessica Marie and I love this book, and we are just so excited to talk to you. I am bursting to ask you this question. Yeah. Please tell me, where did this book come from?
You're like, what did you watch? What fever dream did you have to produce this wild mess of a thing?
Yes, it is so, this book is so elaborate. It is so delicious in everything. It is like, Jess and I were talking, it is like it was custom made for us, truly, with everything that you have put in here. It is lovely. I need to know.
Okay. Well, I mean, I wrote this book in quarantine back in the big C, the big Covina. What do we call it these days? The big.
I think people are just so dismissive of it now.
Yeah, they're so like, whatever, it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, honestly, but at the same time, it truly did happen. So yeah, I wrote this book in quarantine. Didn't have much else to do. There was actually a wildfire here in Oregon. And I don't know if you guys saw it, but in the news, it made all the sky orange. Like it was like the sky went entirely orange and the sun was like super red. So we were stuck inside for 5 days while the sky was orange and super red. And I was like, you know what? If I'm going to die, I'm going to write the thing that I want to write. And so I was like, you know what I've always wanted to do is giant robots. And for me, a lot of people grow up with different things, right? Some people grow up with Twilight. Some people grow up with like fantasy books. Some people grow up with, various other media, right? Like horror movies or something like that. For me, like when I was a kid, those pivotal moments always came to me when I was watching like anime. And so a lot of anime has giant robots in it. And I always really enjoyed them. But like writing is a different beast, right? Like sci-fi is so different. Sci-fi, I don't think has really been a thing for the past like 10 years. Like obviously dystopia took off way back when, right? You had like the Hunger Games and stuff. And then Twilight was obviously like the romance and the paranormal romance stuff made that take off. But we haven't had like a sci-fi, like a proper sci-fi. So I didn't understand how I could both merge sci-fi with my own writing. Like how would I do sci-fi, right? For me, I always love YA books. I love books where you're learning and growing and changing as a person. And adult books do that a lot too, but the age gap is the age group is a bit hard for me, right? Once you get like 25 plus, you're pretty set in your personality, right? For me, the interesting parts of writing come when you write a character and they change pretty drastically. And that's something you find very frequently in young adult books and new adult books. So those are my favorites, right? So I was like, okay, if I'm going to write a sci-fi, how do I do it my way, right? A lot of the sci-fi that I've read is like Isaac Asimov, right? Like it's like old school, very hard, very completely out of my ability range, right? So I was like, how do I do it my way? And then I watched The Queen's Gambit. And I'm somebody who never really understood competition. I don't like competition. I don't like competing. I don't understand why people get so into it. You know what I mean? I never really understood it. I'm kind of more of a peacemaker, but I watched Queen's Gambit and it sort of solidified in my mind what competition is really truly about. And it's like, it's not so much like you're competing just to be the best. You're trying to test your ego. You're trying to test your own abilities to see how far you can get. Right. So that really resonated with me. And I was like, you know what, you know, what's really cool. And also sci-fi giant robots. So I was definitely inspired by the Queen's Gambit, the way that they tier the different competitions, right? She learns and she grows and she has all these. Every person she fights is sort of a lesson for her in Queen's Gambit. So I really took that. It really resonated with me. And I was like, okay, let's make a giant robot book. But let's sort of, make it also a competition. And yeah, I came out with Heavenbreaker. There's a lot of other influences. There's Evangelion. I don't know if you know, it's an anime. You probably do. It's pretty popular. But it's a giant robot anime. A lot of people will say Game of Thrones. I think a lot of people said gave very Game of Thrones vibes, meets Pacific Rim. And I love Pacific Rim. It's one of my favorite movies. But yeah, so those are some of the influences.
That was going to be one of my questions, was 'cause sometimes there always seems to be like one center or like, yeah, one center thing to be like, I want to write about this. How do I build it out from there? And that fact that you were able to pull and like dig deeper too, because there is still so much growth and there's so much complexity with the characters and the relationships with themselves and the relationships with like they have with others.
Yeah, for sure. I'm better at people and relationships and writing than I am in like plotting. Or I'm kind of a pantser and I just sort of let the characters steer the for me, it's not very interesting. Yeah. In writing, it's like, if I sit down and plot out the whole book, I'm like, done. That's a book done. Don't need to write it. It's completely plotted. All right. Gonna walk away now. It's not interesting anymore. So for me, I have to know nothing about the book other than like have maybe characters or like a rough idea of what the ending's going to be like. But for me, the fun of writing is finding out where it goes on its own and how it evolves and how it grows. And yeah, so I'm a pantser. I'm good at characters, bad at plots, but I think I got better with this one. Shout out to my agent, Caitlin. Thank you so much for guiding me with that. But yeah, thank you.
So would you say that you just kind of like word dump all of your ideas and then you start to like edit and make it tighter? Cause you're like, I want everything out there, the characters and like, they have to drive the story and then I'll go from there.
So I tend to get really lost in my writing itself. So I will write and rewrite over and over and over again. I'm the person that's like, okay, next day. And then I'll reread the paragraph that I wrote and I'm like, no. I'll spend like the first hour of writing just rereading what I wrote back. So for me, it's like, I can't dump as efficiently as I want to. That sounds weird, but like I can't word dump without feeling a sense of continuity. Right. Like I need things to make sense in my brain moving forward. Like sentences need to not be dumpy, but they need to fit within the whole that I've made previously, like the scaffolding. It's kind of like a scaffold, right? You build a scaffold from the bottom. Without the bottom, you can't keep building up. So I always refer back to like the bottom. And that makes me get lost in the trees a bit. I start doing the thing where I can't see the forest anymore. Like I just see trees. But that's what an agent's for. And that's what like multiple revisions are for. But yeah, I try to just go with the flow. I'm not as efficient at dumping as I want to be, but yeah, I do just let it kind of flow out. Yeah, sorry, that was a long answer.
No, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Kind of building from this, you're talking about like your writing process and your characters and how they just have to get out of you. Can you tell, I guess me specifically, how you built the world for your new release, Heavenbreaker? Because this is a very like intricate world with lots of things going on. Is that something that you kind of let the characters themselves build, or did you have a framework? Where did this kind of structure come from?
That's such a good question. So the structure wasn't in place until I want to say like the third chapter. So I knew it was a girl who was going to spoiler. It's not really a spoiler. It's right on the cover. This one's not a spoiler. It's right on the cover. There's a girl who's going to kill her father, right? He was a noble. I wanted to mix because I knew I was going to do giant robots. How do you do giant robots uniquely, right? That's what I wanted to think. Like, how would you put giant robots in space and sort of, how would they be unique? Because of course you can call a giant robot, right? But is it special then? Like, is it special? So I got the idea to start calling these giant robots like steeds. Like, what if they were steeds, right? What if they were considered like horses rather than like tools or machines, right? Like, what if they were considered an integral part of something, right? So the moment I humanized the giant robots, I called them steeds. I was like, oh, there needs to be a structure. Why do they call them steeds, right? Like, why are these things important? Why do they have names that are not just giant robot, right? And then sort of a kind of medieval, the idea of incorporating medieval things came to me then, because it's like the only people who say steeds were like people back in the day, right? So the cool part about writing is, or concepts in general, for me, the way I try to do concepts is complete opposites, right? So in romance, you want one person that's fire and one person that's ice. You want one person that's like sunshine, one person that's grumpy, right? That sort of really works. It's a compelling momentum in and of itself, right? It carries a story very far by itself. So you can get really creative because you have that inner momentum already going, and you don't have to worry about it, right? So for this plot, I wanted to sort of do the same thing where I was going to merge complete opposites. So I knew I wanted a book in space. I knew I wanted a book about giant robots. Well, first I knew I wanted a book about giant robots. Then I decided to put them in space. But what is the complete opposite of giant robots in space? I was like, oh, well, medieval times, right? Like the Dark Ages is the complete opposite of that. Like no technology, like rigid social structure, like all of that sort of stuff. So I merged the two. That's when the moment when it became merged, where I wanted a medieval flavored sci-fi experience. But like essentially, like that was the moment I called them the robot steeds. I realized, oh, there's a whole world behind this. And then it sort of spun out from there. Like what would a space station look like if it had a medieval hierarchy structure, right? Like why is the space station have this medieval hierarchy structure, right? And then that sort of brought into the whole, like, we're stranded in space type thing. Like we required a structure very quickly. And one of the easiest social structures to like create, it's not the best, but it's the easiest, right, is like a kingdom, right? Somebody on top ruling, and then everybody else sort of has peasantry and nobility and classes, essentially. So it all kind of spiraled the moment I was like, steeds. So
that was going to be, I feel like all of your answers, I'm like, you're like 3 steps ahead of us, because that was going to be one of my questions. I was like, the fusion of medieval and sci-fi. And I feel like we're at such a place socially that we have just gotten to accept fantasy books as a main part of like everyday culture, and you have mainstream media picking up. And sci-fi still seems to be something that, as much as we love, has yet to the same connotations we're still working through. So to have that fusion of both medieval, which is typically tied to fantasy, and the sci-fi, it feels so organic the way you wrote it in Heavenbreaker.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of sci-fi was very popular in the 60s, the 50s, 60s, when we were doing the space program, right? The space program was a huge thing back then. So there was a lot of cultural yearning for space. And so you see that reflected in the literature, right? Like the Pulp Fiction weeklies of Isaac Asimov and those people. So we haven't really had a cultural yearning for sci-fi. We don't want to think about the future. The future is very, very bleak. I mean, right? We've got climate change. We've got like inflation. We've got all this stuff. Like people don't want to think about the future. I think that's genuinely why fantasy books are doing as well as they do. Fantasy, and like just because
they know how to survive without any technology.
Exactly. Like fantasy books give you this like escape from the looming fear of the future. So people don't want to think about it. And that's why sci-fi, I genuinely think that's why sci-fi is not popular. But yeah, rooting it in medieval times at least makes it feel more human, because it was hard back then. You had to scrabble to survive. So yeah.
That's really insightful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you like space?
That's an interesting, because I have a tab open right now, and it's like a 45-minute video about why black holes maybe exist and maybe don't. And then there's another video there's another tab open that's like, can we travel backwards in time? And it's about white holes. So I mean, I theoretically like space, but like, I don't think space likes me. I don't think space likes any of us. And that's fine, right? Like that, it is what it is. But I do like the theoretical explorations. I like the theoretical, like, possibilities. I love the infinite possibility space. But yeah. the freezing immediately and getting mummified immediately when you enter space is kind of an intimidating factor for me personally.
I personally am terrified of space.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely terrified. The thought of drifting away, right, is just, it like does something to me. Like I go clammy, like it's just something that I just can't like handle.
Yeah.
So I love then that we are set in space. I love things that are set in. I'm a very like face your fears kind of person,
cool.
right? So like, let's go. So I just have to tell you that my my interest, my like excitement was completely piqued when I opened this copy that I have here of Heavenbreaker, and it says, "Welcome to the world of mech suit combat." I was like, "Let's go!
Let's go! Yeah!
All right,
Johnny Robot!"
Like, I was just so excited. I really love sci-fi. I kind of like grew up with it. It was like a thing that I shared with my dad. It's like very special. But I agree with all these points that you're making that like sci-fi is like kind of a tough sell. And it used to be that fantasy was kind of a tough sell. And now it's sci-fi is kind of a tough sell. So hopefully soon sci-fi will have its day and we can all just like bask in the glorious of this. And I do kind of want to like touch on your book here, because we are going to go full spoilers kind of towards the end here. But Jessica Marie and I were talking before we started recording, and we thought that the best way to start talking about your new release would be to ask you the correct pronunciations of some of the names of our main characters.
Okay, let's do it. I'm excited.
Well, could you please tell us? Like we don't want to mangle anything. Sure. Like, who do we have here?
So Sonali is Sonali. That's the main character. Rax is
Rax.
Rax.
You posted her fan art on Twitter, and it's
incredible.
beautiful.
Yeah. So I had that in the works for like 5 months. And the artist is Vetter, I think. I can, well, if you guys can include the credits in the podcast
absolutely.
for sure.
Yep.
But yeah, so I approached them and I was like, hey, can you do this, please? Because your stuff is amazing. She does stuff for Magic the Gathering, which is like beautiful, beautiful card illustrations.
Wow.
Yeah. And their grasp of like medieval stuff is so cool. Like armor and stuff. So yeah, I was like, you have to please do this for me, please. Yeah. So, Sonali, there's Rax, there's Morel, there's Dravik. His full name is Dravidicus. There's the king. There's the king Racinimus. Hautclair. Yeah, Hautclair. I mean, in French, it's Hautclair. And you can say that if you want, but Hautclair is how I say it in my head. So
thank you. Thank you so much. That is very helpful. Jess and I are usually like audio girlies.
Yeah.
So we have the assurance that we're speaking correctly. So that was very helpful. Thank you so much. You have written an absolutely fantastic book here. I don't know if you know, but this beautiful exploration of grief and feeling and what to do with all of these feelings and revenge, but also love and family is so beautiful and so complicated that I was riveted this entire book. It was fantastic. And I do think this exploration of grief that is like a driving force, but also an undercurrent here, was such a surprise and something that I personally don't see a lot in things. It's kind of I don't know. It's not as present as it is here, and I thought it was just really lovely and a credit to your writing.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for this. And I also love the religious aspect that you have brought into this book. I have a background in religious studies, and this was just so fun and interesting. And again, unexpected because I'm like mech suit combat, but also theocracy. Like, let's go. There's religion here. Like, and my last part of this, the detail of wood and amber being so precious here in a world of cold and steel and the description of space as being a cold dragon and that heat, you need heat to live. These little details really made this very large world come to life. And again, a credit to your writing, but also I am just loving this story of space station or like flung into space. Earth is scorched, and we have this story happening on one of these space stations, and we are trying to reunite with the other ones, and who knows?
Yeah.
And that detail of this like this other like looming storyline, this like looming thing. I felt that in the back of my head throughout the whole book. And I am just so excited.
Yeah, thank you so much. Listen, if all goes well, we'll talk about the other 7. I'll write books about the other 7 stations, but that's if all goes well.
Spoiler that we're gonna get 7. I feel like I didn't see that.
So there's 6. There's 6 including this station, so technically 6 more. But I am so excited if this does well to just explore what it would mean for other stations. Like I have ideas for a station that's completely fallen onto a water planet, and then like all of the mech suit combat is underwater. Which,
cool.
Like against monsters or something. I don't know. Yeah. So it would be so sick. But yeah, I want that to have like a cool pirate theme. But yeah, so like I want an old school theme for kind of every arc. So like this one's kind of medieval knights. The next one would definitely be like a pirate yo-ho type deal. But yeah, so we'll see. Thank you so much for your kind words also.
They know, of course. And then I was going to say, like, to the opposite of Laura, where she was exposed to sci-fi and grew up with it and had a household that supported it. I did not come from that background. I have very limited sci-fi really ventures until we started the podcast. Right. And then finding things that we love, or if you're just trying to start off with sci-fi, with Heavenbreaker, you're excited, you're not overwhelmed, you're captivated from the first page. I was telling Laura before we started recording, I go, your description of space, again, super scary. Yeah. Your stomach is like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of space. Oh my God, I can't breathe. Oh my God. Because you feel that you're there and you're looking around and you're thinking, holy shit.
Yeah.
And I think not having really in-depth sci-fi background and not being intimidated, because I think that's the other thing is sci-fi can be very intimidating if you don't know where to start. And Heavenbreaker doesn't do that. It's so welcoming.
Thank you. Yeah. I based it in a revenge story almost purely because of what you said.
Everybody wants a little revenge.
I think out of there's a couple of literary tropes that kind of stand fast, right? There's the underdog, right, which is the Fourth Wing experience, right? Then there's the super underdog, which is Mr. Harry under the stairs. And I think even Twilight to an extent is an underdog story, because it's like nobody sees me for who I really am. You know what I mean? Like I'm the outcast. I've never seen the sun type deal, right? Like even that. Those are very much like underdog type stories, right? The two. Sorry, I'm getting off topic. But the two types of stories I feel like that are really compelling that never really go out of style are the underdog stories and revenge stories. Like the underdog working his way up to king status, metaphorically speaking, and then the opposite way where you lose everything. You go from rock bottom, and what happens after that. So that's kind of what a revenge story is, right? So I think those two will never go out of style. So I wanted the sci-fi to be relatable. I wanted it to be human driven. I wanted it to be people understood what was going on with the characters, even if they didn't understood what was going on with the world, right? So yeah, that's exactly you nailed it on the head. Exactly why I made it a revenge story in space.
My question for you, how much research did you do on jousting?
Oh, man. Oh, boy, howdy. Jousting is so much fun. I now officially follow, I think, like 10 or 15 medieval historian Twitter accounts purely so that I can get facts and figures. I follow like, I think 3 accounts that are just armor, devoted to like medieval armor and stuff like that. To be perfectly honest, I was watching Queen's Gambit at the same time as I was reading Wikipedia about, I had favorited, actually, this is, now that I remember it, I had favorited the Wikipedia page on jousting. Like, I think 4 years ago, I want to say, just because there's a tidbit in there that struck me as so cool. And I'm the kind of person that loves to drop tidbits at parties. You know, I've got the spicy brain. So I'm like, guess what? Eagles have a separate pair of eyelids.
Wait, really?
Eagles have a second pair of eyelids for when they're fighting. That's like completely hard and like transparent that they can see through. Which is wild.
I didn't know it was like a shield.
Yeah. Please do not quote me on this like verbatim. But basically the tip of a lance, when it impacts on another rider, it deals something like 3.4 times the rider's weight in G-forces.
Wow.
So like calculated, I think it's both the horse and the rider, to be perfectly honest, but I think it might just be the rider, one of the two. If it's just the rider, 3.4 times the rider's weight in G-forces would be, say the average man is like 150 pounds back then, right? That would be 3 times that amount. So that's like 450, I want to say, for 450 G-forces. Or something like that. Anyway, I'm bad at math. I'm so sorry, math people.
No, I didn't even think the force involved. You would think it was more of like maybe like of an upper body, but not the actual.
Right.
Math so like, I'll say that. I'll be like the math of it all.
The math, there's like math to it, which always blows my mind. I can't find the exact math, which is POing me off. So I really apologize to everybody. I might have gotten that wrong. But basically, like there are so many G-forces in the tip of the lance that it'll just the lance shatters on impact most of the time, right? A lot of people like don't know that the lance usually would just shatter. It wouldn't pierce through anybody. So anyway, I forgot the question. Anyway, I had that Wikipedia article up. I'm so sorry. And I read it and I was like, you know what? That's so fascinating. And I kept it in the back of my brain for many, many years. So it's funny that it made this return like this.
It's funny how like those little inklings, that it's just not even like manifest, just like, oh wait, this reminds me of this other fact, and how it just becomes present in whatever you're working on, and in a more fun way, instead of like, oh, that was trauma that I had buried it forever. You're like, oh, but this is just like a fun fact that gets to be applied. Fact. Yeah, this isn't like trauma. This is fun.
Yeah. I think, and then some part of me, when I saw that factoid, I kept that factoid in the back of my head, not accurately per se, but I kept it in my head. It was funny that I saw G-forces there, because I immediately, I associate personally G-forces with space stuff, right? Like I associate with space stuff. So to see like G-forces being referred to in jousting, I was like, what do you mean? So maybe my brain like subconsciously linked those two, and that's why they put the giant robots in space and made them joust. I don't know. Who knows? So yeah,
that's where part of the fusion came from.
There you go.
With the sci-fi and medieval.
There you go.
Well, I also think, of course, I'm not going to speculate on any of our ages. It's not important.
I'm 22 for anyone who asks.
There you go. There you go. It's perfect. All of us are exactly 22. It is helpful, I think, maybe that the Knight's Tale is like kind of in our like cultural like background.
I miss you, Heath.
So like,
miss you, Heath.
Yeah, R.I.P. So that even so, like when in your book they're like, yeah, I'm holding the lance. It's like, I know that.
Yeah.
I have this like deep image of like, I know what that looks like. So let me put that up there. Like, all right. And then we're like this, like, all right, let's go. I think that also, kind of lends itself to the approachability kind of just that you were talking about earlier. And I want to bring up you're talking about you were inspired and were watching and enraptured by, I'm assuming you were raptured by Anya in the Queen's Gambit. I mean, wow. But the theme of chess is in your book. And I was talking to Jess earlier, as we do, and there are so many quotable lines in your book. There are so many. There are so many. It is just incredible. But the concept of always moving forward was just something that I really loved. And then our characters, Sonali and Dravik, are kind of talking over this chessboard, and he's explaining, like, you know, the pawn, you know, is very special. It only moves forward. And then when we get to the end, it's like, you know, but what happens, you know, when you touch the other side, it's like you become something so different. That, let me tell you, that blew my mind, because that people say, like, you know, romanticize your life, romanticize everything.
Yeah.
That made a pawn magical. Because, like, I know that that's what happens,
Yeah.
but to have it described like that, and then to have Sinali's entire story kind of described like that was just, I sat there and my gas was flattered. Like, I didn't know what I was just like, wow, that is,
thank you.
that is really something. And that kind of speaks to the story.
I appreciate you.
Hi, everybody. Laura Marie here. I am popping in to say from here on until about, I would say, minute 52 or so, there is going to be full spoilers, people, with the author. It's amazing. It's fantastic. We are all in. So if you do not want to be spoiled about this book, please just skip forward. You will hear me again saying that spoilers are done. There's your warning. Don't say we didn't warn you. So, full spoilers here. Wow. Okay. I was so invested in this entire book. And let me tell you, I want to speak very quickly on the formatting of this book, which I thought was fantastic, because Rain's chapters that go negative, like, oh my goodness. I loved that.
I'm so glad.
I thought that was so creative. I was like really in there. I thought it was wonderful. And there's also a couple other, I'm not going to spoil everything. There's a couple other.
I mean, this is the spoiler section. So
there is, but I mean, a surprise. There's a couple other small POVs that we get that are very integral to the plot. And when those happen, I was like, whoa, like, yes, like, this is so fun. Like, what is that going to be? Just to say again, I was excited this whole time. But kind of circling back to a very basic question, how did you come up with the enemy, the goo, and the silver whirls? Where did this kind of detail come from?
So the enemy came about because I knew that, again, remember I talked about, like, as soon as I called them steeds, something started happening world building wise. So I was like, why are we mounting these steeds? Against who? Is it against each other? Is it against somebody else? So immediately my brain went to, it's probably somebody else, right? Because if you make these steeds so complicated and larger than life, these are clearly weapons, right? And these are not just weapons you use against other humans, because other humans are very fragile. You don't need something as big as that to kill people, right? You need something as big and complicated as that to kill something that's more than people, right? That's different than people. These are machines perfectly suited to killing something that's not human. And, like, the size should be the first giveaway for that, right? Like, the sheer size of them. And, like, the weapon that they use is the lance, right? And all that sort of stuff. So basically, I knew that the steeds had to fight an enemy. I knew they had to be bigger or as big as the steeds. And I knew that they probably would have to have powers that we had never encountered before, or like abilities we never encountered before. So for the enemy, it was like invisibility, right? It's like they blend in with space, right? They have these teeth, they have these huge, like, tentacles, ? We don't know what they are. They're limbs of some sort. And there's a lot of them. So we call them tentacles because that's the only thing we can think of, right? When we see a bunch of protruding things coming from one mass, we call that tentacles, as people, you know? So yeah, I made them have, like, things that were just incomprehensible. I wanted the enemy to be incomprehensible. And we had made these machines not to understand them, but to specifically kill them. Like, we didn't care about understanding them. But then I realized that if the enemy were to attack, right, as we were, let's say, like, we wouldn't have designed something to kill the enemy to begin with. So they'll attack, right? We won't know how to deal with them. A lot of people will die because this is an enemy that has powers we don't know about. We can't even counter them, right? So what do? We just try to survive until what? Until what happens, until what changes the tide of battle that we start winning. And I think I realized that it would have to be, we steal their own technology from them, or at least we start to understand them better. And our leaps in technology as human beings come from, like, unfortunately, fighting, like gunpowder. A lot of like medical advancements come from horrific incidents in history. So I realized that it would have to be from a dead enemy. Right. We would have to have gotten a hold of them somehow and study them and make technology based off of that. So then I sort of spun it into our technology advances. Once we get a hold of one of the dead enemies, our technology advances rapidly. We start like making arcs. We make arcs to protect ourselves against enemies. We start making things. Once we protect ourselves, once we have a base that we can protect ourselves against the enemy, we start building counteroffensives, right? Because that's the first thing you do in like war or battles. You want to establish your base and then launch counteroffensives. So the counteroffensives in this case are the steeds, right? The first steeds are very rudimentary, obviously. And then they start getting better and better as the war goes on. But to begin with, they're pieces of crap, right? So the question about giant robots you see in a lot of anime, in a lot of like any of that sort of media, even Pacific Rim, there's a question. It's how does the human integrate with robot? Like that is the biggest question. For Pacific Rim, they take two people, they link them together, and then they put them in the cockpit, right? So it's some sort of neural link, but it requires two people. So excuse me, they explain it away with a neural link. They don't actually tell you what kind of neural link it is. They just tell you that it's two people are required. And that is enough for people to be like, oh, that's the mechanism. Whenever you try to explain something that's completely unexplainable and completely out of the imagination, you need to give people something to hold on to. So for Pacific Rim, it's, it doesn't matter how it works. You just need to know there's two people required to make it work, at least. Right. So that is very interesting. I took that method and I was like, okay, well, how do people interface with the machines in this world? Right. And so I was like, if they built the steeds based off of the dead corpse of the enemy, studying the dead corpse of the enemy, like the technological advancements came from there. If they built it off of the enemy, they'd probably use a part of the enemy to integrate the human into the robot. Right. So that came with, that's where the fluid comes from. Like that's where the nerve fluid comes from. Basically, spoiler alert, big spoiler, but the enemies don't actually really die. So when I think of aliens, I know a lot of people go immediately to like War of the Worlds or like us versus them type deal, where it's like, these gray guys with big eyes can die, right? But the true concept of an alien is something that is completely foreign, like not even different country, not even different planet. We're talking galaxies, we're talking light years, we're talking inconceivable things that like we haven't even thought of, right? Like there's a planet that rains diamonds, right? So like there has to be an alien that doesn't die, or like there has to be an organism that doesn't technically die, right? Like tardigrades, when they go into space, they go into like a hibernation period and they can survive. They can survive the radiation, they can survive all of it. Tardigrades survive. So I was like, okay, well, what if we had an alien that goes into a hibernation state, but it looks completely different? So the aliens, the enemy in the book, goes from that big tentacled thing, and it turns into, when it quote unquote dies, it turns into this like silver gel, like a little puddle of silver gel, right? And it can rebuild from that, but if it's not given its food source, it doesn't rebuild, right? So I figured, why not put the gel? Why not put the pilots in a big thing of gel? Oof, I'm sorry about my long answers.
No, these are so good. And it's
this is great.
This is so insightful for anybody who's listening, for anybody who's for us, for anybody who's listening.
Yeah, you're getting it down low.
Into like this is your book. You're explaining your world to, and also saying like, why aren't you reading this?
Yeah,
for sure.
Just amazing. Something that we talk a lot about here on ACOFAE is that something can be plot with romance or like romance with plot. There is a romance subplot here, but it is like not our primary focus. I love that. I love when there's just like a bigger goal. Like there's just something else. Like there's something else that is driving us.
Not that there's anything wrong with like with romance either. It's just it depends on like what you're looking for and what you're reading at that moment.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Don't get me wrong. I tried so hard to make the romance more smutty. The problem is, like, I tried so hard, but the issue I kept coming across every time is that Sonali is just not ready for it. Like she is not, there is nothing in that girl's brain other than kill, kill, murder, kill. Like, you know, like she has so many problems. Like, I don't think that she is ready for an intimate relationship with like herself or like let alone other people. Right. I think she's learning more about herself through writing. And as she learns more about her like capabilities through writing, she starts to open up to Rax a little bit more because she's more confident. Like she's not having to defend herself from death all the time. Like if I lived the last 6 months running for my life from like assassins that I was sure that were going to come finish me off, I too would not be ready to boing a boing, but that's just me. I'm sure other people would be boing boinging all the time. But for Sonali specifically, like she is so brain rotted in the direction of murder that I don't think she's ready for it right now. So the little bits that I could manage were like what felt right between the two of them. They have problems communicating, the two of them. Like they both see each other in themselves, or they both see themselves in each other. There we go. Woof. But like, they're not ready to make concessions to come together in a meaningful way. But like book 2 is going to, I think, really bring them together. Like Rax has to teach her how to, cause she's just self-destructive, right? Sonali's self-destructive, and he's going to teach her how to like be destructive in a direction. Kind of right now, she's just sort of in all directions, wanting to hurt everything that hurt her. But I think he's going to teach her how to fight Hellrunner, because Hellrunner is the best robot there is, right? Even better than he is. Like Rax is the ultimate writer, but like the only other one above him is Hellrunner. So he has to be the one to teach her how to even be able to have a chance. So they're going to have to improve their relationship, whether or not they want to. They're going to have to start to learn to communicate. So yeah, I tried to put a ton of romance in. I'm so sorry, but like she's not cooperating with me, lads. In the second book, we're gonna get to the doinking, I promise. But for the first book, there's like a little bit of kissing. There's a little bit of naughty times. And that's unfortunately all I could wrestle in there.
Well, and the trust that Sonali has to have with everybody that she's encountered.
Yes.
And encountering, because it has been just her and her mother. And her mother, I don't even want to say dies. She was murdered. And now Sonali only has that one focus. And even in, not with Rax, but with Dravik, where he's trying to physically guide her in the first parts. She goes, she's had to go through certain traumas to get the information that she needed about her mother's murderer. And she can't even fathom being touched. And he goes, I'm sorry, that's not where, I promise that isn't where I was going. Right. I hope you know that. And she goes, I don't know that. They always say that. She goes, they always say that. And don't they always?
Yeah, she has a lot of trauma wrapped up in that. And I was very careful to frame it, because obviously I'm in support of sex work, right? Sex workers should deserve to practice their work in like safe, healthy environments, free of like judgment. So I was very careful to like, Sonali's experience, particularly with sex work, is her own experience, and it is a very brutal one, but it is not everyone's experience. And so she has a friend who has a very different experience than she does. She was just so desperate in those terms that the person who was in charge of her sort of work took advantage of that. And I feel really bad for her, but she's going to learn, she's going to grow, she's going to change. And yeah, I'm proud of where she's gone. So.
Well, and she starts, I mean, we start off like revenge, but we end with revenge.
It's true. It's true.
But also with like a little bit of a found family. And that, seeing Sonali kind of open up that way was really lovely. And as someone who loves dogs, Luna was just
I'm glad
a
you
joy.
liked her.
Such a joy. It's just so wonderful. And the relationship there too, that Sonali has with Luna, kind of goes from ankle biting to curled up in bed, to getting the name, and to really being part of the family. And Dravik too, kind of a little bit kind of like on a different but parallel course, says over and over again, like, you're not my father, I am not your father. Yeah. But there is a care there. And Sonali does say towards the end something along the lines of, I want to die. And then I think about Rax, and I think about Luna and going home. And I think about Dravik, and I think about Quilliam.
It's like William with a Q.
There you go. Quillen, and I want to live. And it's these conflicting emotions that we have that kind of builds this complex character of Sonali. And I really like this like revenge, but also a little bit of peace, kind of, but revenge.
Yeah. It's the push-pull. Yeah.
It is. And it keeps you really, really engaged. Something else that kept me, Laura Marie, very engaged. These arena scenes with these announcers, these commentators. What was writing that like? Because you're like writing it's like you're looking down on your story from it is very fun.
Well, first of all, thank you. I'm glad you like Luna. I'm glad she's a cutie pie. Caitlin, basically my agent, was like, you need to put something in here that's like cute for her to relate to. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'll do a dog. Everybody likes a dog.
Love a
Even
dog.
better if it's a robot dog. So yeah, the fight scenes are really fun. I tried to keep myself in Sonali's shoes every single time, because it's like looking down on it would be a bit difficult. Like having a bird's eye view for me in a fight scene is a bit difficult. So I have to center myself in like whoever's fighting. So it's the main character, right? Like I had to stay in her head because this is the first time she's encountering fighting like this, right? Like it is both the reader's first time and it is her first time. So it's important to stick with her and to show like just all the sensations, all the feelings, what's going on, like how to deal with it. I tried to stay very, very close into her head. And more specifically, I tried to stay in on her in a way where like the reader can see that she's communicating with the robot, right? You can see she's communicating with Heavenbreaker. But the way they communicate, because again, like, I don't know if this is still spoilers, but let's just say that the robot is unique, right? And communicating with something that is completely unique, there's gonna be challenges, right? Like this technology that merges human and robot is not going to be one that's like typical. Like it's not just like press a button and go. Like this is going to be something different. So I tried to condense it into thought, or like the basis of thought. Like what is thought, right? If thought equals action in the saddle, then you have to make sure that the thought is in its most pure form, like in its most undiluted pure form. Because if it gets muddled, then you're not going to go anywhere, right? So I try to think of it in terms of like a baby, where it's like, what does a baby learn in order to get what it wants first? And it's like words like give, right? It's like words like up. It's like words like down. It's like words like no, or like yes, or like friend, or like mom, stuff like that. So I tried to make the interaction between them something that was like pure of thought. And not in like the moral sense, just in the instinctual, like when you think go, what actually happens? When you think walk, what actually happens? That kind of stuff. So yeah, the
there's
fights
no
are very,
underlying tone. This is what it is. There's no way you can read into it, kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Like all of the other, you're so real. You're so real and like intuitive, because like all of the rest of the book is like extremely read between the lines. It's extremely like there's big mysteries and everybody's conniving and nobody knows who's thinking what at any given time. But in the robot, it is purely just no reading between the lines. It is what it is. Your intentions have to be pure and like just, instinctual here. So that's a good point. I never realized it. Thank you so much. It's a cool juxtaposition.
Well, all of this is just so very cool. It is all just so very cool. I am loving this relationship that we have between Sonali and please remember Morel.
Mm-hmm.
Morel.
Yeah.
I love
her
this.
Cousin.
her cousin. Also because Sonali is lonely.
Yeah.
She has this thought, even Heavenbreaker is lonely. And so they have each other, but each other does also have a want.
Yeah.
And Sonali sees Morel and she's like, the thoughts are like friend, like we could have been like growing up like sisters. We could have been together. And then we're almost at the end of our spoilers, but spoilers at the end of this, Sonali is taken. Yeah. She's off on a little adventure here, and Dravik is getting a team back together. Yeah. Right? Like we're going. Like, let's go.
Heist.
Yes.
I love a heist.
I know, right? Like it's just so fun. And it is kind of attributing the found family, the loneliness, the bond that we have when Dravik is like, Rex, you got to go get Morale, and Rex is like,
there's
like,
no way,
no way, absolutely not. After everything that's been going on, like, no. And Dravik's like, bet
she's gonna help. Yeah, like don't worry. Yeah, I've got plans. He's always got plans. That little stinker.
Well. And plans. I guess my question to you, kind of before we wrap up, would be: is there anything, even in the vaguest general sense, that you can tell us about Hellrunner?
Yeah, sure. So Hellrunner is going to start with a heist. I think that much is pretty clear. If you read the end of the book, it's like, he's getting a team together to rescue her. So yeah, Hellrunner is going to start with a heist. There's going to be competition again, right? There's going to be tiered competitions this time because it's the quarterfinals. I messed up a little bit. I don't understand how competitions work, but basically there's going to be 4 or 5 more fights for her to go through. It's like the finals. Like she's finally in Heavenbreaker. She's passed all of the other rounds, and now we're getting to the finals. So there's going to be a time skip, just a little bit. There's going to be a heist, and there's going to be fights. There's probably going to be a lot of fricking. I mean, kind of almost freaking, because Rax promises, I don't know if we are still in spoiler territory, right? Basically, he's like, we cannot bone until we fight. I'm not going to, he's like, I want to fight you without knowing you. In that way, because having boning, shall we say, makes it easier to ride against a writer, because you just sort of know how they operate and how they work, like on an instinctual level. So he's like, we're not going to bone until we fight. So he's kind of the last fight. He's one of the second to last. So there's not going to be boning per se, but there's got to be there's going to be other stuff essentially. So yeah, there's going to be some boning. There's going to be, I think, more found family. And I think the ending is going to make me cry a lot. But I'm crying just thinking about it right now. I'm tearing up a little bit. But yeah, I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be all the stuff you love, but with a heist at the beginning, and more found family and more boning, sort of.
Hello. It's Laura Marie again. I am here to tell you that spoilers are done. We're done. Now it is just general information. Now we are just talking. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you stuck around for spoilers, and if you skipped forward, hello, welcome. Enjoy the rest of this episode. Thank y'all so much for listening. We love and appreciate y'all so much.
Now, I know that we're just being super selfish as this, this episode's going live on the 20th, and the book isn't even out yet till the 21st. But what's your writing speed like? Or is it, I don't know if you can talk about this, or if you're like, I have certain deadlines that I have to meet, so I'm going to have to find a way.
Yeah, real. So the people at Red Tower were like, hey, when do you think you're going to have a manuscript? And I was like, I'm going to be real with you, Red Tower. I love you. I'm going to sit you down though and be real with you. I'm not going to think about Hellrunner until the book's out. So I have thoughts and plans for it, but I'm not going to sit down and start writing this until Hellrunner is out, or sorry, Heavenbreaker is out. So the 21st of May is kind of my deadline when I have to stop thinking and start actually hoofing it.
But that's so nice that you can kind of focus on Heavenbreaker. You can this is your soul, even though you have an idea of where the story is going. You're but Heavenbreaker is getting your soul attention right now.
Yeah, I think I draft pretty fast. The Heavenbreaker I wrote, it took I think about 3 months, but the edits are what's really hard, and the revisions are what's really hard. So we'll see where it goes. But yeah, I'm excited. Yeah.
We're so excited. I always think of how I can tell how much I love a book if there's I'm already ready for a reread, and I'm just and I know I'm not gonna be the only one.
Aw, thank you guys so much. I feel like you guys really understood the book, and You had some great questions and great insights to it. So it's always fun when you let people into your mind palace and they kind of understand the architecture. So I really appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your art and and being vulnerable, because I feel like something that's not talked about a lot with writers is just like once it's out there, it becomes everybody's, and you're sharing like this level of vulnerability when you share your art with the world and you don't just that's appreciated.
Yeah, thank you very much. You guys are so sweet. Thank you very much.
I have my last question. Okay. My last question for you has nothing to do with your book. Oh, absolutely nothing. It is just my personal little question. Okay. Have you played the new Dragon's Dogma?
No, I played the old one for like 500 hours though. The first one.
Yeah. Me too. I just wanted to ask your opinion because my husband listens to a couple gaming podcasts and they're not a fan. Okay. And they have like tainted my subconscious a little bit, and it's making me a little wary. And I just wanted to see if to get a different perspective. Okay. Let's say.
Yeah, I mean, so I would give it just a year to let the patches come out and to let it drop in price, and to also let computers get better. One of the things that people are complaining about is their computers are just not big enough and good enough to handle things like Dragon's Dogma, and that's understandable. Dragon's Dogma is more of a console game. It feels like a console game that's been ported to PC, but basically give it about I would say 6 months for patches to come out to sort of help with like performance issues. Don't worry about like the microtransactions people are complaining about. You don't need them to play the game. Just play the game. And most of all, my favorite game ever is Fallout New Vegas, and that game was like slandered on release and everybody hated it and thought it was dookie garbage, but I had the best time of my life with it, and it continues to influence my writing to this day. So like don't let the haters hate. Like go in and experience it yourself and see whether or not you like it, but give it some time, give it some patches. So
are you watching the Fallout show?
I just binged it all, actually. I just watched it all, and oh boy howdy.
How do we feel about the ghoul?
I hate him. He's too edgy. He's too edgelord. And this is coming from a girl that wrote a book about revenge. You know what I mean? Like he didn't have enough character growth in the first season. I think he'll have some in the second season, but they had none for him. He just stayed the same the entire time, and had no like real character growth. And for me, the fun thing about characters is character growth. The other two were great. They had a lot of character growth, but he just sort of kept on trucking. So I didn't like him. He's a little bit too edgelord, but his design is great. And I look forward to seeing what they do with him in the future.
Oh, that's so exciting. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer those questions that have nothing to do with your book.
Girl, I love talking about video games. Are you kidding me? Love it.
Yay.
Where can we find you? Like, have you been doing events? I think you recently did a Polycon, right?
I did. So I was at a Polycon. I'm going to be signing in some Pacific Northwest bookstores. So Vancouver, Portland, Seattle area. I think there are, cross your fingers, but there are feelers out for me at Comic-Con. There are feelers out for me at Emerald
San Diego
City.
Or New York or both?
San Diego. Maybe
so
both. I'm not sure. But it's mostly West Coast because that's what I can afford to travel to, unfortunately, right now. But hey, if it gets big enough, I'll be sure to come by to New York for sure. East Coast, Midwest, everywhere, everything, the South. But yeah, for now it's just it's the West Coast. But Hellrunner might be different. So we'll see, depending on
we gotta get it. We have to get everybody talking about it. We gotta get you everywhere. No, I'm so excited.
I am on Twitter as Sara_Wolf1. I tweet about my current obsession with anything and everything. That's for the tweets. If you guys want to know how my bowel movements are, go check out my Twitter. Just kidding. My PR person's like, you got to stop talking about poop. And I was
She's going to be like, this is what we mean when we're going to edit it out. Now we're going to look over every single ACOFAE
keep the poop in there. The people must know. When you get older, your bowel movements are very important. Anyway, so she was like,
we have watery bowels and everything. We could have them here.
IBS stands for I be sexy. Anyway, so she's like, you need to start posting about your book. So I posted post more about my book now. I post about how much I love my friends, all the video games I like. I am also on Instagram as author Sara Wolf. That is where you will get the most pure news about my book. I will be posting like upcoming tours, upcoming features, upcoming places I'll be, announcements, any sort of that, show announcements, crossing fingers. But like any news, it would be author Sara Wolf for sure. And then I do have a Twitch career, but right now it's kind of on hold. So maybe someday I'll come back to that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is so great. Thank you for taking the time and letting us gush about your book to your face.
Thank you so much. It's always truly nice. I work on this thing alone in the dark a lot of the time. So being able to finally talk to people about it is, it's very moving, and I appreciate you guys very much.
Well, even if we don't have an episode to record, feel free to reach out. We're always happy to hop online and chat.
Aw, thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we hope you have a really great day.
You as well. Have a wonderful month. Make sure you take care of yourselves. Take your vitamins.
Release.
Happy release. Yeah!
As Sara mentioned, please feel free to follow her on her socials. We'll make sure that all of that information is in our show notes. And also, please feel free to follow us. We're at ACOFAE Podcast on Instagram. We're also both on TikTok, ACOFAE Laura and ACOFAE Jessica. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.